Hello, welcome to this chapter. Here we'll take a look on one of the most important lines in the Benoni, which is the Benoni with g3. Basically, this Benoni inspired me to do the course in the Catalan because the most common move order to enter it is that after knight f6, c4, e6, white can play g3 and enter the Catalan, but after c5, white can also try to play knight f3, but it's also considered to be equal-ish, and after d5, we just take and play d6 and we'll transpose to the Benoni, as white doesn't really have any extra moves than to playing the normal knight f3, knight c3. Yeah? So and this is why I consider that this move order wasn't that suitable for the Catalan, and white should need to play knight f3, open up to more possibilities with a6, b6 that needs to be covered, and bishop b4 is a bit different for sure. But in general, I felt like this was enough to justify knight f3 being played. So after having all this in my first course here, it's also some kind of, I don't know, enjoyment to do this, to explain this variation to you. And I played many games against it, and how thanks to Abruk publishing this course and playing with g3, I got so many wins after that, because it's a very difficult position to play for white. I mean, I recommend you to not get overconfident, like white really has chances to create some counterplay and has some ideas. But in general, it's very difficult for white to play, and in practice, it's terrible, I would say. Even recently in the World Cup, Nakamura played the Benoni with black against g3, so even top-level players, I mean, we have games from Magnus, we have games from Dingley-Ren with black, so it's widely considered a good defense against g3. So let's have this main position here. The main take of why I don't consider this position really good or understandable for white is that this bishop on g2 doesn't really do much. Like, basically it's colliding to the center, so doesn't have the spirit of the Catalan, and also it's very hard for white to create something tangible. Like, the ideal setup is to put the knight on c4 and then at some point have enough pressure on d6 to be able to play, I don't know, f4, e4, e5, but white needs too many tempos, and basically trying to play bishop f4 wouldn't be that great as well. Like knight e8, they can play safe as well, and white doesn't really have a plan, let's say, per se, a general trend, like, okay, if I had 1000 moves, I would play like this. Yeah, it's not like f4 variation, for instance, that white wants to push for the center or to create an attack in the center. It's quite obvious. But this line is purely strategical and purely move my move, which is why I highly try to avoid it with white in general, and I don't recommend it with white as well. For students, I highly prefer some more kind of positions. And against the Benoni, I mean, you should be happy in general to face this position. So, but there is a lot to cover. So let's start with rook e8. Here white has tons of different moves. In general, with rook e8, we want to play knight e4 and to exchange a couple pieces to open up the bishop. And basically, also, we want to have the rook, we would love to have some space on b4 to have the rook, yeah, which is a very creative idea. But so first we'll cover the sidelines, and everything will make sense. For instance, h3, just a waiting move, like for white. White in general wants to do something like this. So this move is made to counter knight d7, knight d5, and at some point white wants to play f4 in one go, so the h3 is kind of useful. But here we'll play a quick bishop d7, which is somewhat of a novelty. We'll see model games here. And if white wants to play a4, we play knight d4. And here it's another example of what we said just a minute ago, that we want to play knight d4, but we would also love to have the room for the rook on b4. Yeah? So here after knight d2, rook b4, and here we have an excellent placement for the rook. We might even give the rook for an exchange, like white can play this kind of plans. And you'll see in the model game how this position is really nice for black. We would just want to open the queen side, and already we exchange a couple pieces, which is something great. And we'll see here how this bishop is completely irrelevant to the action. So that's another example of how this bishop will be the main problem for white. Yeah? Knight d2 is also another possibility. and so white wants to counter b5. So white has those two approaches with b5, no? Or to allow it and counter it, yeah, like the second degree logical idea, or to prevent it. So after b4, knight b5, knight c4 is coming. Basically, white wants to create some pressure here. And here we need to be a bit careful. So knight d7 we develop, knight b6 we defend, and white wants to play knight a5 and to get this bishop, the knight here. Again, this bishop looks nice, but doesn't mean that white is able to play. But okay, after knight c6 can be tricky. So here we want to play queen c8 and then a6. We want to get some space on the queen side, and after something like bishop f4, bishop f8, we defend, and basically we have great compensation here. The knight can go to e4, we can go queen a2, the queen is amazing, and basically this knight here looks very nice, but if you think about it, this knight doesn't annoy us in any way. Like, we have all the pieces around it, and basically this knight cannot move. So sometimes you get a great piece in a great square, but it's kind of relevant. Yeah, it's when I also explained in many chapters that some bishops only control air. Let's say that it's a bishop that is a great, nice diagonal, but this diagonal is completely irrelevant to the game, yeah, to the rest of the pieces. So in this case, this knight has this kind of problem. And white doesn't have an easy way to follow up with e4. We have some entries with the queen, we pressure on e2. So yeah, I'd say that this position, and also after queen a2, we are pressuring d5 as well. So white is into severe trouble. Yeah. So yeah, this couple interesting lines, but h3 is one of those. a4 is another move that has been played. White tried every move order to make sense, but now we play knight d4 since we have the square on b4 for the rook. And here we take. And yeah, after knight d2, we play rook b4. Yeah, in case of rook e8, knight c4 might be very annoying, and the bishop is coming. And again, we don't have a way to develop properly here. Yeah, if you think about it. So again, in the Benoni, you need to be a bit ahead of your opponent. You cannot go move by move. Yeah, like but here you will enter into problems. So rook b4, and now basically queen c2 wants to play knight c4, so we go for knight d7. The usual counter to knight d2 is knight d7, as you will see in the main line, in order to answer knight c4 with knight d5 or knight b6, yeah, and to not allow this knight to stay comfortable on e4. So rook a2, white wants to play b3, bishop b2, and kind of make our rook a bit stupid. a5, I really like, we start with this move, and after now b5. And the idea is that after AB, I want to play knight b6. That's why we don't start with b5 straightforward, because here knight b6 is, we want to simplify all the queen side and be left with these 2 pawns, these 5 pawns against these 5 pawns. So basically we have a pass pawn, and white doesn't really have an easy way to push the central pawn. So we have a very interesting, complicated position. So here after bishop b2, we just take, we play a4, and the position is just draw. This is a very deep variation that it's kind of tricky for both, because here we want to play, let's say, bishop d7, we want to take, and here we need to be careful that knight e4 looks threatening, but we can just take here on b3. After rook e8, we take with a knight f6, king h8. I mean, looks menacing, but basically we have 2 pass pawns here, and the bishop is irrelevant, the rook is irrelevant, the knight is coming, and something like knight h5, we could go for f6, and now queen e7, and now white doesn't really have anything better than repeating, yeah, with knight h5 and c, and because otherwise we are just getting too active for white to answer. This is an example of a very let's say concrete line, but you could even take on b5 and it would be fine. You don't need to go for it, but this is the best. So bishop a3 is the alternative, and after bishop a4, we give up the exchange, but look at this beautiful bishop and the pawn structure. And here, after bishop a6, the pawns are so sketchy, and also remember the bishop on g2 is completely irrelevant. Now after queen a5, knight b6, we want to push both pawns, and suddenly white is, I mean, well, I'd say complicated position since white has objective defenses, but yeah, in practice I'd say we win very easily here. Like, it's very hard to defend, and our plan is very easy: queen a5, knight b6, and take the pawns and push them. Yeah? And basically this line, I mean, it's very deep for white to understand. Like if you know all the way that knight a4 it doesn't work, it's easy to explain the rest of the things. But again, this a4, I never face it, really. So yeah, it's not that complicated. So now we'll go for some other lines. Here, I think rook e1 is one of the trickiest because white is some kind of in the middle of not playing a4, not playing 92, and can get troublesome here. And here, rook e1 is much more useful than h3, I'd say. So these endeavors with bishop d7 don't work as well as before. So here, knight b d7. So the trickiest part in this chapter is to figure out the first moves, but then it goes smoothly. I'd say also what I like about g3 is that if you don't remember, it's kind of fine. Like it's very difficult for white to punish you immediately. It's not as f4 variation or I don't know, some other more critical and straightforward variations. So knight b d7. So white usually has different approaches. In case of the main idea is to play knight g4, knight g5 at some point and exchange a couple knights, and we have more room for play. So for instance, something like a4, a6, a4. And here, okay, we could also go for b5, but this is just nonsensical. It's very complicated because after 92, white has the extra option of taking here or taking here. Like, okay, but if you want to check it, feel free. But for me, it looks too much. So for instance, a6, a4, knight g4 makes a lot of sense. And now there is a very nice idea that whenever we have both knights pointing to e5, it also happens in the Benko, in the Volga, if you play it. White has an interesting option to kind of get away to exchanging anyone, and suddenly, it's much easier if I show you a case. Here suddenly, the knight on e5 doesn't have room for anything, yeah? And basically f4 is a huge threat, and we don't want to play knight b8, and we don't want to get expelled, let's say. We don't want to, for instance, also play knight f6 and get f4, knight c4, and white is pushing everything, yeah? So here, I really like g5. Basically, we give room for a different square, and white is left with a very awkward position. f4 is the only sensible move. And here we're following a game from Dingley Ren against Navarra in 2019. And after knight g6, knight f3, white has really nice control of the e5 square, which kind of hinders our development, and basically we don't have an easy move, so we need to pay attention. Like here, knight f6, e5 is interesting for white, yeah, and white is pushing through the center, so white is achieving a goal that is easy to play, yeah, so here we need to be wary about it. But here taking a bishop h6 is, I feel, really a great answer, as we force f5 and we want to kick the let's say we want to kick the f pawn, so we have the e5 square. In exchange, we get this trapped bishop, but white also gets a couple minor pieces that don't belong really well with this post structure, yeah? So after bishop c1, white could, I mean, taking here, I mean, white could take on b2, and I mean, we have a weak king, but white doesn't really have access to any kind of attack, as knight g5 is covered, and the queen is not going anywhere, so yeah, it looks dangerous, but in reality, white doesn't have anything to argue for sacrificing an exchange. So after queen c5, we just have a beautiful knight here, and after king h8, I feel our position is much easier to play. Like we will go for rook g8, queen e7, and or maybe instead of queen e7, f6 we can go, and after bishop d7, queen e7, we have room for pressure in the dark squares into the king side, and also we have room to play b5. And white needs to justify these minor pieces that don't make any sense. I mean, this is kind of position that the engine can hold, since the engine can readapt and play dynamically and strategically, but here we have a great advantage in the long run, as the pawn chain is terrible, and we have the breakthroughs, and white is very exposed. So, yeah, our king is not really in danger, I would say. So, yeah, this is a great example of how, with simple ideas, basically, we can counter the plan of our opponent, yeah? So knight h4 is kind of similar idea, yeah, why he wants to play f4. And here, we play knight g5, and obviously now bishop f1 would be much worse, as the knight here this is not as harmonic as knight on d2. Like here we could even go for c4, I'd say, because knight on h4 will need to lose the tempo to go back. And now g5 would allow knight f5. So here, I don't know, maybe going for c4 looks a little logical to me. And we give up a pawn, but we have a lot of initiative. And here it's much different because with the knight on d2, now knight c4 would be an option. But here, for instance, f4, we play here, take, take, take. I don't know, just many moves look appealing to me. f5 looks appealing since this rook is pinned. Knight c5 first, and something like now f5. I mean, this looks very healthy for black. Also, we could go for a more positional approach with bishop g4. We don't allow this knight to return, and now rook c8. Basically, we don't need to do anything crazy. We basically made space for our pieces. We exchange a couple pieces. We exchange the best defender piece, and white is very much overextended. Yeah. So, yeah. So f4, knight c4. It's funny how our knight keeps going, but after knight a5 and c4, finally we kind of find some destination for the knight. And again, the minor pieces for white don't help white to play e5 at all. So we are, after knight a5, c4, we are, I'd say black is even better here because we find some meaning to our minor pieces, and white is still left with, okay, I'm not sure what white is doing. Yeah. So as usual, we leave the preparation whenever our opponent doesn't have a clear plan, doesn't have a clear idea what to do, and we do. So it doesn't make sense there to just try to dig deeper, yeah? So basically you've seen this knight g4, knight g5, let's say, and here bishop f4 is the most principal move, but here we play knight g4 still, yeah? And the idea is that after bishop d6, queen b6 is great, and we have a double threat, and after bishop c4, we include this beautiful move, c4, and basically, if in case of e3, it's very apparent why we did that, because now we have some kind of an extra double threat. And in case of rook f1, we can just take here, and after bishop d2, we just take the piece. But here you are like, okay, but what's the difference? Why we need to do it now? Because now rook b1, queen a3, and now imagine the pawn on c5. You see where I'm going? Now rook b3 would be terrible for our interests, as we may gain a couple pawns, but white will be left with amazing center, bishop here, also the rook on e1 ready to play e4, and it will be a very dicey position. So yeah, it's, I feel, a great great subtle move to c4, and we are basically winning already. Yeah. So white also has this weird bishop g5. But has been played in correspondence, and it's a very thematical move against knight g4, but white wants to displace, force us to play bishop f6 or bishop f6 and annoy our queen. But here we play queen b6, looks very logical to me. And in case of queen c1, we just play c4, and again, we'll play knight g5, knight c5, we have room for all our pieces, and then develop the bishop, and if queen b3, I really like a6. It's weird, because why queen b3? Again, this is very specific for this position. The idea is that if we take, suddenly we don't have an answer to knight b5. As a6, now knight b5, and white has this serious double threat as this pawn is pinned. So, yeah, I don't know. We are here just for very small ideas, but a6 makes sense to cover now b5. And now after take bishop f4, it's a very smart move order. And the idea is that we kind of need to move one of our pieces to defend d6, the bishop or the rook. And this implies that we don't have enough control of the e5 square. So white, if in case of bishop f8 or rook d8, white can play h3. And white is kind of happy that we are not allowed to do this, and now suddenly e4 or maybe 92 might be a bit better for white. But still, I still don't see why white is better. But yeah, it's very thin, it's very ingenious. Yeah, I'm trying to explain the reasoning behind, but for me in practice it's impossible. But here bishop c3 just solves all the problems. It's a very specific line. Again, you've seen the danger is not that much, but after knight f6, suddenly we are getting the pawns. So let's say bishop d6, knight d4 is very important, and suddenly we take here, and we have a lot of presence in the center, and we don't allow this bishop to be strong. Yeah, like we can play f5 and condemn that bishop to the side rank. Here, for instance, bishop e5, we can play f6 to force this. And look at these beauties. And so we can take here, we can take here, we have a very safe pawn chain, and basically, yeah, great position. Again, this bishop c3 doesn't need to be reminded. It's very specific and also showcases how hard it is for white to create a threat and how creative white needs to be. Like, I don't know. That's why I feel this position is very hard. Like, okay, if you memorize everything for white, even then, you need to understand some subtleties that are not common. Like, what is this queen b3 at all? Yeah? h3 is much more normal, and now after knight e5, white doesn't really have anything because these plans don't work as our knight is secured here, and later on we'll go for this as usual. When we are left without a plan, we do this. Here knight d4 is the only serious threat, I would say, pressuring d6. And after queen c8, rook c1 wants to play b4 and access to c7, get the d4 square. I don't know. Basically, white wants to make use of our sudden paralysis in their position, because if you take on f3, ef3 is really tricky. And suddenly we have some problems in here with knight f6 is a threat, knight d6 is a threat, and we might be losing, yeah? But here, just h6, I'd say it's very easy. And we'll play f5 to kick this knight and not allow this knight to run to e6, which is something that, if you play the King's Indian, you know that you shouldn't allow it, yeah? So h6, and then we kick the knight, and then we play b6, bishop b7, and we developed everything. And after, and also f5 helps us to control the center and prevent e4 in the future. So yeah, I don't know. It's very strange, this line, this rook e8, this rook e1, but okay. And finally, after covering all these sidelines, and yeah, we entered the main lines. Yeah. So here knight d2, it's the most played line. And basically, it's, as we said, white wants to play knight c4, and we counter it with knight d7. Yeah? Typical dance, let's say, with the knights. So, and here white usually wants to make waiting moves, because this bishop doesn't move. So this knight needs to move, but let's say sometimes white wants to play h3 to gives us knight d5. Now white can play f4, kick our knight, and now e4, and white is getting all the space for free. Yeah. So here we are left without plan. But as usual, what do we do when we don't know what to do? a6 and rook b8. Here I also comment on b6 being an interesting option, but yeah, I feel rook b8 is much easier, I'd say. And again, we want to play b5, and in case of a5, we play b5, and we take with the knight, as knight on d2 loses the sense now, and it's much easier to play. And here I feel like after knight fd7 is a great plan to play after, because we want to play c4 and knight c5, and since this bishop doesn't have a solution yet, and this knight is covering c4, the only piece we can really improve is the knight on f6, because we free this bishop, and also after knight fd7, c4, knight c5, we create some pressure on these weak squares, we create some pressure on the queen side, and again, white wants to play e4, f4, so with this plan, we kind of have we get ahead of it, and white doesn't really have the coordination to do anything else, so yeah, I'd say this is very simple. And in case of knight c4, we play knight e5. Again, taking here is terrible, I'd say, because white exchanges the best piece, the best knight, for one of the two we want to exchange. And now just rook e8, I'd say it's good enough. And after bishop f4, we have this kind of position. And yeah, and a dream Benoni. Like we have plans with bishop f5 and knight d4, we pressure on b2, we also can play h5, knight h7, which is very interesting to go for the king with knight g5 later on, which is kind of surreal, but yeah, it also makes sense. And again, all our pieces are on the positions we dream of. We don't have problems with space. It's basically the dream Benoni, yeah? And white needs to be aware of all the threats we can have. So yeah, I mean, it's terrible. So knight a3 is the common move, yeah? Like white wants to let's say retreat the knight in a square which this bishop is not impede, and also now play f4, e4, yeah? And now then go back with the knight, yeah? That's kind of the dance. But here we go for knight h5. And as I say here in writing, like this move has been known for we have games from Kasparov in his peak. So basically, it's very old move, very old theory, and it's still healthy. The idea is to get ahead of f4. In case of f4, we can sacrifice the exchange. Could be interesting. It's very creative, this kind of position, like now taking on f1 and play bishop e5. But I'd say here knight d7 is an extra option, as usually white prefers to play these ideas when black doesn't have the chance. Like we already have the bishop on d7, as we'll see in another variation. Yeah. So here king h2, and here because we are threatening g3, and here I really like bishop c3. As we've seen before already in this chapter once, there is sometimes the idea to take on c3 and then seize the e4 square. And suddenly we get all the light squares, and the pawn on f4 is very sad. Yeah, like white would love to have f3, a4, and basically counter all our minor pieces. But suddenly our bishop has a future also in the dark squares. And for instance, c4 looks appealing to control the diagonal, but after knight a4, here queen f6, very important. White doesn't have neither rook b1 nor rook a2 thanks to knight c3, and I guess knight c2, b5, and basically white position doesn't make any sense. If white cannot achieve the diagonal, and our knight on e4 is very strong, and basically if white tries to kind of kick our pieces, we can counter it with h5, and suddenly we will get this f5 square, which is amazing for the bishop or for the knight. Again, white is left without a plan, without a sense of the position, and we have very easy counterplay, all the pieces pointing to the right direction. So that's why white usually plays e4 first. So if, in case we play bishop d7, now f4 makes a little bit more sense. So this is the main line. Here we have rook f8 as an alternative. You'll see the model game from Kasparov. This is not good per se, but again, the position, I mean, if you fancy a lot engine evaluations, which I highly recommend you, if you are below, well, if you are below, don't use the engine. Point. Okay, you know the case of Gukesh. He didn't use engine at all until he was 2500. But in general, for instance, I'm from 92. I'm from a generation that close to Carlsen, Nepomniachtchi. I had the same age of Caruana, Dingliren. I played against them in the World Championships. Basically, when we started playing, engines were more or less useless. You could rely on them on very tactical positions. Still, they weren't very creative, let's say, but very complicated positions that might spot how we win. So basically, we would learn and grow with understanding, not with engine. So, and at some point when we were 15, 16, and we were already very well developed, engines start to be good. So you got a good base, and then you got the engine evaluation. So this is a great example of how the engine says white is amazing, but you will see in the model game how doesn't matter. Like it's still very complicated, and it's a crazy position. And I highly recommend you to check out this game, so you will see the spirit of the Benoni, how it works. So bishop d7, we want to play b5 as usual, and now white wants to do something with this knight, which is kind of isolated here. So in case of f4, we need to give up the piece, and here we have a couple ideas. We can play b5, aiming for b4. But it's also fine, but knight g3 makes a bit more sense. And here, in case of rook f2, which makes sense, like it claims like, okay, what is the knight on e5 doing, yeah? Here I really like knight c6. It's so nice to, I don't know, you are losing a piece, but you're like, but I'll lose it this way. I'm gonna choose, yeah? And after d6, bishop c6, basically we're threatening knight e4, we're threatening bishop d4, b5 is also in the menu. And for the price of a piece, we'll get 3 pawns, a very weak king, a very easy game to play. The rook on a1 doesn't do anything. The knight on a3 is also misplaced. The bishop on c1 is also very passive. Yada, yada, yada. No, like we have a lot of compensation and a very imbalanced position. That's why you bought this course, yeah, to get these crazy and funny positions, yeah. And in case of f5, we take, and now b5 is a very important move. I mean, the pawn on e5, we'll take it later, but in case of bishop e5, white will be very happy to bring this knight into the action, or maybe include a5 first. And now we achieve the same position, but we get more space for our pieces. And now after rook a7, white is pressuring here, kind of pinning our bishop, so rook f8 makes a lot of sense, and we want to play f5. And again, it's another great example of how this bishop can be completely irrelevant. And this line after bishop h6, bishop b5, knight b5, we have this amazing move. I really like this position, like, because it's very straightforward. Like, it's white playing the most direct move all the time, so it's easy to remember. It's not like white has tons of choices and you need to remember everything. And here c4 is somewhat of a trick that I had never seen before, and I want to share with you. The simple idea is that we are threatening the knight, and we are also opening this diagonal. So basically, if the knight moves, we can just do a check and win the rook. Yeah. And in case of bishop f8, rook f8, queen c4, that seems that is defending. Now we can play rook b5. And here after bishop d4, we have an excellent endgame. Because the opposite color bishops means that the most important thing when you have opposite color bishops and queens is king safety. Because the one that has a weaker king doesn't have a minor piece to defend the attack of the other minor pieces. So for instance, here king h2, we take. Again, how is this bishop gonna prevent us from playing queen h6, bishop d4, bishop b5, and getting through the dark squares? This bishop is like a pawn. That's why opposite color bishops without queens is drawish, because both bishops control one diagonal, and basically you trade the power. But with queens, suddenly you can create some kind of attack and the opponent cannot defend with one of the bishops. It's irrelevant. That's why it's dangerous. So it's a good strategical concept for you to know. It changes a lot. And basically we have this fun variation. I mean, this variation, this G3 variation has a lot of fun ideas. And here I also, here white has also different ideas. G4 is another option. Same idea. If we retreat back, white wants to play f4 and kick our knights, and yeah. So here b5 is a great option as well. We want to play b4, and if white takes on h5, we just play b4. We get back the piece, and again we exchange a couple pieces. We have better position. The king's safety is much. I mean, we have more king safety, let's say, and white is left with a very bad position, let's say. We have all the pieces where we want, where we want them. So here, in case if white tries to at least get rid of their knights, c4, and again we have the d3 square, queen goes to e8. I mean, white is a bit better here. I mean, as I say here, like it's amazing version of it. So yeah, this kind of b5 answer, you need to get hang of it. And here a5 is the main idea. Here I highly recommend you to just note this. Like here you can go b5, bishop b5. We'll see a model game of this. I'd say go for this. Yeah? Go for this. It's much easier. We just want to exchange the weird bishop, and here after queen b6 we have an excellent compensation. We'll see in the model game how white is left with a terrible position strategically, and here after knight a3 we want to even play queen b3. It kind of resembles the Benko, and again the bishop on g2 is terrible and completely ignorant. Yeah, and basically I would leave it at that. You have also a model game with queen a5, which is a funny variation I used to play, and also it's very much known. And here the point is that after g4 f4 white gets a piece for a change, very complicated position, but I feel b5 is so easy. Like, just play b5, yeah? And I'll have both model games so you to understand the positions and the dynamics, but yeah, b5 is too easy, I'd say. So here we kind of facing e4. White has also another moves. Here we want to play f5, so something like king h2, f5 would solve all our problems. Because now f4, knight f7, white doesn't have the same pushing power. Here we could take on c3, but here it would be somewhat of an awkward position, because now we are pawn up, but white has a very simple plan to go through the diagonal, yeah? So be careful, because here is not the same to having a piece on e4, blocking everything, and to have a pawn that doesn't do anything, yeah? This would be a great example of a position. So here, I would recommend maybe knight f6 or maybe just take. Yeah? And now knight f6, we win a tempo. And then after knight here, we can play bishop d7 and b5. And look at this knight on f7 covering very well d6. So knight c4 is harmless. Yeah? So yeah, this again, white is left with two pieces that don't do anything, doesn't have a center. So that's why white needs to do something. King h2 is too slow. So here we also have g4. And here almost any move is fine, but here I wanted to show knight g4. And we have another example of dynamic sacrificing a piece, and here bishop g4. We want to play queen d7 and b5. And here queen e1 is the only move that wins. That keeps the game alive for white. Which is for me surreal, yeah, queen e1 needs to be played. The idea is that we want to play just queen d7, and at some point have this bishop h3 threat and attack the king, and also b5. And basically, white doesn't have useful moves like here. Like sometimes it's good for you to just check a position, forget about the engine. I mean, if you're using engine, I'm getting very pissed right now. Yeah, stop with the engine. What's white's next move? Like again, white doesn't have any solution here. Knight c4 faces b5. Moving this bishop where? Why? Why bishop d2? Like bishop c3 and bishop e2 might be a threat now. And also queen h4 and bishop e5 might be significant a threat. This knight cannot help. This knight cannot help neither. So again, queen e1 is the only move. For instance, queen d2 was also played in order to prevent bishop c3 and bishop e2, but this loses immediately. We'll see it by comparison, because queen e1, well, okay, now we'll see it this way. It's much easier for you. After queen d2, we play in h6, because white is also threatening queen g5. And after, let's say, now queen e1, the thing is, the reasoning of queen e1 is to play against queen h4, play f3, and to defend, because we are attacking so hard, yeah? But here, it's a very fun position, like we play b5, take, and now rook b5, and now rook e2, and white is defenseless against queen h4 and bishop b5. And the key idea is that now after queen a8 check, we have king h7, so that including h6 works. So again, white needs to know this, because if we do the same thing without h6, so queen e1 straightforward, we would be forced to play bishop f8, and we need the bishop to just play bishop e5 and win. We have too many pieces, and the mate is, I mean, just if you want, check it, the mate is obvious. Like, white cannot do anything, like we have too many threats, yeah? And we have too many pieces, like these three are, even four, I'd say, these five are irrelevant to the king, so we have 5 pieces against the sole king. So, against queen e1 directly, we just play queen d7 again, and b5, bishop h3, and I'd say this position is very easy for white to mess up, and we have easy plans with bishop h3 and b5. And again, yeah, I feel this is the position you're looking for in this course as well. So yeah. So white has some small ideas here and there. For instance, a5 first makes sense, but again we answer with the same way, yeah, and with this knight fd7 that we talked about before. It's just to make a recap, because you need to be asking in this position, okay, what if white starts with this? What if white starts with that? Yeah, and it can get a bit messy, but yeah, I highly encourage you to test it on a board, because it looks different. It's very easy to memorize here, but here is a game of you play this, but I outsmart you, and I get ahead of the development. So here white, instead of h3, has a4 as an extra option, but now a6 basically transposes now. And now e4 is the only option. But again, when we don't know what to do, it's easy. We play for rook b8. Here knight e5 would be interesting, but here h3, and after knight d3, knight c4 can be annoying, because we don't have an answer now. We get this bishop, but we cannot play bishop d7. We cannot do something against this. We cannot play b5. So yeah, this could be tricky, yeah? So yeah, knight d5 looks very pleasant, but yeah, rook b8 is a bit better, yeah? After knight c4, knight d5, take, f4, rook e8. Here white needs to play e5, otherwise the position doesn't make sense, and we will be improving our position much. And here the idea is that white is winning an exchange, but I really like knight e8 as it showcases how dark squares are under control. Because now knight d6 will be an excellent blockade, we'll push for the queen side, and again, these two pieces are colliding against the white pawn on d5. White would love to not have the pawn at all, because it would allow knight d5, would allow bishop d5, would allow some creativity. But even if the sacrifice happened like d6, for instance, after I said that, you might say, okay, but this looks great, but still, the knight here covers very well. In case of knight d5, we have everything covered, all the jumps for the knight. And in case of bishop d5, we can just play king g7 if needed, and f5 is possible, bishop d4 is possible, and h5, h4 is also a really nice idea to break the remaining pawns of the white's castle. So yeah, white doesn't really have much to show in this knight d2 variation. So after checking this a4, before we go this a4, rook e1, knight d2, h3 variations, we go for bishop f4, which has a different kind of flavor. Bishop f4 is one of the critical lines because basically we don't have an answer to the questions we solved before. For instance, knight e4, we have the problem that the rook doesn't have a safe square on before. Let's say after knight d2, there is the option of rook f4, which has been played many times, but I don't like it since white's best plan is actually the most logical, which is going for knight c4, e4, e5, and opening up the position. And also rook b4, the rook doesn't have a safe spot here, so something like a3 can be very tricky. After rook c4, rook b2, knight c4, and basically we are left with, white is left with a very great center. So again, and also if we want to play knight d7, okay, we are losing a pawn, maybe. So, but here queen b6 could be interesting, but it's not the same thing. So here, after bishop f4, we take, white can just play rook c1, and white is left with a really nice center, and looks too fishy for me. Like sometimes knight d2, knight c4 is coming, and also, yeah, like we don't have an immediate counterplay to justify it. Also, the queen here looks nice, but after rook c2, you suddenly realize that the queen is also kind of trapped. So yeah, allowing d6, knight d5 as well. We have something similar in another variation, but knight h5 was already been played, and so basically it was working tactically. Yeah. So here we need to be creative, and the idea is to develop some pieces to create some counterplay. So here bishop f5 was a move that I feel it's also playable. It's interesting because we want to play knight e4 and take with the bishop. We want to develop, but there is something very different here. But I highly recommend h6. Was recommended by Kazim Zanov in his course about the Benoni on ChessBase, and also it's been played by Injik many times, which is one of our gods and saviors in the Benoni, at least recently, and also against a strong player like Puya, very dynamical and very fun player to watch, and obviously our god here, Pansulaya, played many games with h6. What is the idea of h6? To understand this, we need to understand what's white's idea. So if white will be allowed to play multiple times, white will play knight d2 and knight c4 at some point. Yeah, more or less the dream. Yeah, in the future. Now it's a bit difficult since knight h5 is happening after knight d2, but in general, white will try to go for this in the future. So something like maybe starting with queen c1 to prevent h6, and now after knight d2, knight c4, if we go for knight h5, white can retake with the queen, and now the pressure on d6 is stronger and stronger. Yeah? So in general, we imagine that. So we play h6. So if knight d2, we can just immediately play g5. And basically knight g4, and we are killing the bishop. Yeah? And we are getting a great position. Again, we exchange a couple pieces. We have time, something like knight c4. Here we could even sacrifice, but knight d7, knight d5 position is great. Yeah, white doesn't have anything meaningful. Yeah, and yeah, so here white has a lot of creative moves, and we'll start with h4. I'd say it's the most logical for me. Like white prevents g5. Yeah, like the first question we need to ask. Here knight h5, we want to kick the bishop, and including h6, h4 prevents white from having this annoying bishop g5. Yeah. So here we force bishop d2, and now we might include a6, a4, and knight d7. Basically, rook b8, b5. Again, the same plan as always, and we basically prevented anything for white, and white is left with a position that also the fact of h4 being played, g4 is not a threat at all because the king is too weak, and yeah, I don't know. This just doesn't work. Yeah, and here we have also rook e1, some waiting move, and rook e1 is a bit underrated, I'd say, because this position is still a bit awkward and weird, and white needs to be careful, and black as well. But it requires very deep preparation, I'd say, for both. So I'm not worried that you will face it casually. And so basically you will likely face it, let's say, on classical time control against a player that always plays like this. So you'll have plenty of time to prepare in advance. It's not. From my experience, I've also seen that in Blitz, no one plays this Benoni with white because it's so hard to remember all the subtleties, because it doesn't. There is not a blueprint anymore at all in this position. So you need to remember everything at the precise moment and why and the reasoning. So it's not easy. So basically here I recommend g5. The problem was that bishop f5 is countered by h4. And after knight h5, queen d2 is something of a possibility. And here we can also play this, like here and play h5 now, because now g4 can, or like we want to develop this knight, but this bishop needs to have some safe spot here, yeah? And this is also playable. So, but again, this is it's very ridiculous how white needs to play, and the position is still fine. But here I recommend g5, which is much easier. And after bishop f5, h4, g4, knight h2, and bishop g6. Why do we play bishop g6? If we play knight d7, e4, we might face, and then knight g4 is a threat. Yeah? So we get ahead of that. And the bishop on g6 is likely to be there in general. And we don't want to rush for h6, because then, I mean, other options could arise for white, like the bishop has more freedom of movement here. So bishop g6 is the most precise, because sometimes we don't want to play h5 and leave some squares weak. So in case of bishop f4, again, we are not allowed to play knight d7, so we play knight h5. Yeah, and so e4, now h5. Now getting the knight on e5 is great, and white committed to e4, so we don't mind as much this square. Yeah, it's a bit subtle, but makes sense. And now bishop f4, and suddenly we are not allowed to play knight h5. We're not allowed to play knight d7, and here Anand, Vishwat and Anand played a really nice idea, which is knight fd7. So this is an idea we have seen before, that after bishop d6 we can play queen b6, and we threaten both pawns, the bishop and the pawn on b2, and also we have pressure on c3, so after bishop b8, queen c3, and we have an excellent compensation. We have the control of e5 square, and it's not easy for white to kind of push anything, as we will always take in passant, and now it's not the kind of position where white was happy to have the center, very mobile, and a lot of space for the bishops that we've seen recently. So here black is very happy. We will regain one of the two pieces, and later on we'll push the queen side, and white has a couple central pawns but cannot do anything with them, yeah? And we have the bishop safe on g6 and useful for once. So yeah, it's very subtle, like, but black is fine. Yeah, this rook e1 is not very common. The most common move is queen c1. Basically, white wants to threaten h6, and it's important to not play on d2, since now after g5, white has space on d2 with the bishop. And otherwise, we will be able to just gain the bishop on e3. Yeah. So here, bishop f5 is the most common move. After h4, white wants to do something with the bishop, because this is very restricting. Here it's very nice as well to play h6 g5, as this bishop has room on g6. And finally we solve the question of what to do with the bishop. So here, knight e1, it's a very interesting move to play. In case of knight h2, we could go for h5 as usual, and we will be very happy to reallocate our resources. And after knight e1, king h7, and we want to put the king on safety, defend the pawn. Maybe with the knight on e1 is a bit more exploitable, the g5 square. The knight can go to c3 after bishop g5, then f3. I don't know. And after knight c2, again, we play this preemptive bishop g6. Yeah, the idea for white, I mean, that's the thing. I find it very hard. Like, I understood all the ideas for white, but they're so creative and so engine independent. I mean, it's very hard for me. Someone finds on the board that after knight d7, bishop f4, knight h5, because now taking here, queen b6, and we would basically trap in the bishop. White can play knight e3. And if we take here knight f5, this is great. The knight on f5 has an amazing square and is kind of annoying everything, yeah? But okay, this is the depthness that white requires to understand, yeah? So here, that's why we play bishop g6. So again, if you make a mistake, if you forget something, the way to punish you is so insane. And also maybe we are talking about a slight advantage, not punish for winning, yeah? So, yeah. Now knight e3, knight bd7, as usual, when white wants to access c4, we want to counter with e5. So here h5 has been played already by Yufa. I recommend you to check his games, because it's maybe the only grandmaster that is successful with this line with white. The only one. Because he was very dedicated on learning deeply every line, so he was ahead of the curve. But it's not practical at all, yeah? So after here, white, the idea is that if we take with the bishop, knight f5 is very annoying, yeah? So we take with the knight, so we lose this pawn. And here, okay, b5 is the move I propose, so the position is so crazy. The idea is that after taking here f5, and the knight doesn't go anywhere, and the knight on b5 is a bit exposed as well, and the e2 pawn is weak. So now, in case of knight h6, we can play knight f6, and this knight doesn't go anywhere. And in case of knight e3, we can also follow up with f4, and suddenly we're attacking all the king. We don't mind the pawns, we are just pressuring e2, we're pressuring the king, the queen is coming. Like, this is terrible news for white. Again, this is not a position that white plays for safety, and the fact that Yufa got great success with it is related that he studied incredibly deeply and he was already a grandmaster. So I wouldn't be worried to play this, I mean, against anyone. Even Nakamura played in the World Cup against Gledura, which is very strong, 2650. So again, b5, bishop h6, and here we have this funny idea, which is knight e5. The idea is that basically we are threatening both pieces. White is forced to play bishop g7. So it looks flashy, but basically white only has 1-2 moves all the time. Like, it's not something. And suddenly the bishop is trapped here. So bishop f3 is kind of the only move. And after we take, we are left with a pawn down, but suddenly after queen d7, sorry, we are left with a position that is very scary for white. I mean, we are getting with rook h8. The bishop is very well developed, we expanded on the queen side, and white is not threatening at all to do anything with the majority in the center. So I feel it's an excellent position. I mean, it's very likely that we win in few moves, let's say. So, yeah, I mean, we have all these complicated lines, but in general, it's very difficult for white to play, and we just need to, I don't know, be thinking a bit about the plans, and okay, this knight can shuffle through here, that's why we need to be very careful, and suddenly shuffles through here as well. So it's very strategical and deep lines, but once you get the hang of it, I feel it makes sense, everything. So yeah. Here the main line also is bishop e3. The idea is that white wants to play knight d2, knight c4 after h4. Yeah. So here bishop f5 is the main move. Here you also have knight d7. That's a very interesting try. And after h4, we play h4 and f6. What is the idea? The idea is that we don't want to allow white to play knight d2, knight c4 and to get comfortable in the dark squares. It looks a bit awkward for our bishop on g7, but basically we are asking, okay, white, what do you do exactly? Yeah. So here we want to play knight d5, knight f7 and maybe develop the bishop through f5 or play f5 later on. And here b4 was already played against Niemann actually in Baku really soon again for the young talent Leon-Luc Mendonca. Because in higher rated plays, some people try to play for g3 and try to look for very sneaky ideas. So here the idea is that after taking knight b5 is threatening knight c7. But after knight d5, knight c7 would win an exchange. So here we need to go for b6. After knight b5, knight d5. Take, queen c2. And here the position looks weird, but again, the plan I gave you before works very well, which is knight f7. Basically, we solve the problem of this knight. We put it in a square that makes sense. And also we'll regroup this knight with for e5, and later on we can go for f5 or even develop this bishop, and black is more or less safe. I mean, this is an alternative that it's very cheap to play. I'd say you can just play here and have experience. That's why I give it. Because here after bishop f5, you enter the main line, which is fine. And but here you need to know a bit stuff. So here knight h2 is funnily a novelty, but it's tricky because if we play king h7, suddenly f3, and here take, bishop here g4, and suddenly white is having a great attack. I feel this could be a great opportunity for white to try, a good try, because king h7 that looks innocuous, suddenly we have a theme that it's not very much recurrent here. But here, after knight h2, we go for h5. Yeah, and here, yeah, it's a bit innocuous. I feel, oh, good. Yeah, and here after bishop g5, knight d2, and yeah, we have a game from Erwin Lamy, I think. And after bishop g6, we kind of have solved everything. Like, and the knight on h2 is not dangerous. We're not facing these kind of plans that can be highly annoying. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, just a small trick. It's an oldie for white. So yeah, but to see how, again, it's very difficult for white to create something, and needs to be very creative. So here the point is that finally white is achieving what white wanted. White will have the knight on c4, bishop on f4, and suddenly the position will be amazing. But here we play rook e3, which is one of the sweetest structures. Like suddenly white is left with all the minor pieces controlling light squares, all the pawns controlling light squares, and we have excellent control of the dark squares. And here the main line is bishop g6, knight c4, and basically we need to solve the problem of developing this knight. After queen e7, we will see many model games here, 3 and 4, to understand that this position in practice is somewhat terrible, I would say, for white. And white has lost almost every game. And here the engine would give like a clear advantage for white. Yeah. But in practice, it's impossible, I would say, to play very well. And yeah, I feel this made more sense for you to see in the model games, to understand why it's difficult and why white, okay, has some good points, like, okay, it's better, but you'll see how this position, for instance, I will tell you something like, okay, in this position, white is almost decisive advantage, but tell me, what is white doing? Why? Okay, it's the engine knowing it, but the engine knows deeply that you don't have anything to do, and in 10 moves I'll have this plan that is very deep and dark, and I don't know, you'll see in the model games for sure. That's why I give an alternative as well, because this position, I mean, I feel most of you will like it, but the other one with knight g4 and f6 is much more fluid. You have more chances to create complications, and it's not that rigid as this. Usually in the Benoni, I don't like to give some like rigid positions that, okay, if white knows very well and very deep, okay, you're still fine, in my opinion, but yeah, for you, if you don't fancy the position, and also if you have a game tomorrow, maybe it's more logical to play the other way around. So here, after knight b5, it's very important to include these two moves, as you will see in the model game from Sosa, that after e4, knight h5, black won in few moves. So yeah, I'll leave it at that. Just check the model games, and you'll see how the the compensation for the exchange, and white doesn't have any activity of the rooks. So basically, that's a good symptom. If the position is very close, then white doesn't have a chance to activate it. So yeah, without further ado, I feel this is the most critical line. And yeah, after that we cover more or less the whole h6 and bishop f4. And in general, we covered everything in this variation with g3. So as a recap, I'd say this variation is incredibly hard for white. We have the general plans as if white wants to play 92, we play 97. And the same idea of if we don't know what to do, usually a6, rook b8, and b5 is the answer. And again, we have this special line with bishop f4 and also the theme with rook e8 and knight d4 that we want to make it whenever white play a4. So we have this bishop d7 against h3 to force a4. Yeah. So yeah, I'd say this is the worst version for white. I'd say the Benoni, maybe. It's very difficult to justify it. It's very hard. You've seen in the many examples I gave you that white needs to be like a machine, like very creative, like or having very deep prep. But okay, we just need to know one more move, and what now? Your position doesn't make sense, doesn't have an easy blueprint, as we said. And yeah, I feel you will be very happy if you are an IMSO Indian player. I'm pretty sure you you stumbled into this chapter first, and yeah, you can get some benefit from the move orders and yeah, this G3 variation doesn't really frighten me that much. That's why also I try to prevent it in my course in the Catalan. So yeah, I feel you'll get great success here. And it's also a lot of fun to check these lines. Also, I want you to try to calculate, try to not try to memorize some of the lines, but try to make sense of, okay, what's my opponent playing? This is the greatest question you need to be asking constantly. Yeah? So okay, hope you enjoyed and see you in another chapter.